Mercedes thought that the W15 would push them back into title contention in 2024, but early data suggests that the car falls short of the standards set by Red Bull and Ferrari. While the Silver Arrows appear to be in a close race with McLaren and Aston Martin in the top half of the field, the car's early performance falls short of the team's expectations. So now they're back to the drawing board and ready for some upgrades. With that in mind, let's look at what various important members of the team have said about the car this season to get a sense of where they may be missing in performance, and what they will be upgrading in the coming races, to ensure they'll be able to challenge Red Bull soon. High-speed cornering is a major worry for the W15 thus far. When Lewis Hamilton was battling Lando Norris in Jeddah last time out, the amount of time the McLaren was gaining in the high-speed opening sector was so big that the 7-time world champion compared it to racing in a different category for him. I mean, the car is good in the low speed and not so bad in the medium, but in the high speed we are miles off, Hamilton explained after the checkered flag. It was like I was in a different category when I was going through the high speed between the other guys around me. So it's frustrating for sure to be 3 years in a row in almost the same position. Or, it's definitely tough. But we'll get our heads down and we'll keep working away. And I know everyone back at the factory is pushing as hard as they can, but we've definitely got to make some big changes. You know, we haven't made big enough changes perhaps. You look at the 3 teams ahead of us, they still have different concepts to where we are in some areas, so we've got some performance to add, that's for sure. The car's troubles in high-speed corners have been linked to the driver's lack of rear-end stability, with both Hamilton and George Russell experiencing bursts of oversteer that make it difficult to trust the car when they need to. We've got a quick car, but it is on a knife's edge, Toto Wolff explained after qualifying in Saudi Arabia. The drivers are struggling to squeeze out the lap consistently. George was on his way to a strong lap and could have been fighting for spots on the second row. Unfortunately, he lost the rear of the car. Lewis, meanwhile, never had the feedback from the car that he wanted, and that meant he couldn't go faster. More than merely adding a larger rear wing to the W15 to increase downforce, Wolff admitted that the W15 is inherently deficient in that area when compared to its quicker opponents, with high-speed corners being the key area in which the team is falling behind. I think there's a bigger factor with lacking high speed than just a rear wing. We're missing downforce beyond the steps that you will have with a bigger rear wing, Wolff explained in Saudi Arabia. We tried it on Lewis. They have something which we don't understand because we are quick everywhere else pretty much. We know that when we have a smaller rear wing, we are compensating what we're losing through the corners. But it's just the high-speed variant where we're losing all the lap time. But that isn't all, as the Mercedes seem to be back in 2022 with its bouncing. And while porpoising has been mostly removed from the grid, Mercedes has stated that bouncing has made a comeback in the first 2 rounds of 2024. Though not to the same extent, the team will work to resolve this issue as quickly as possible. In Mercedes' post-Saudi Arabia debrief, trackside engineering director Andrew Chauvelin stated, "In qualifying, we were also suffering a bit with the bouncing. Now, that was less of a problem in the race. There's more fuel on the car, you're going a bit slower, and that seemed to calm down and wasn't such an issue." Russell stated to reporters in Jeddah that their pace loss to those in front extends beyond a bouncing car, saying, "I think there's more to it. They're so complex these days, these cars are so complicated. The tyres are very difficult as well. Right now, we don't have the answers." When asked about the car bouncing in Bahrain, Hamilton feels the problem extends beyond Mercedes. "No. I think everyone's car is bottoming, so I think the ride height was good." But there was a worsening of the problem in Saudi Arabia, with Hamilton telling Sky F1 a week later, "We've tried every setup change, we can't get rid of it. It's difficult to explain it, but we had some bouncing in Bahrain, but nowhere near as intense as here. But that first sector, super high speed, a lot of lateral load, and the bouncing really offsets the car quite a bit. If you imagine when the car goes up and down at the back, your balance shifts forwards and rewards. If you're doing that at 160, 170 miles an hour, correcting that each time, Max Verstappen is flat through turns 6, 7, 8, and the balance is just stable. And that's what we're working towards. We've got to fix it. It's 3 years in a row. We've got to get on top of it. But there have also been some good developments for Mercedes this season. After the engine cooling issue that plagued both of their cars as well as power unit customers Williams in Bahrain, Mercedes looked to have rapidly addressed it by the time Saudi Arabia arrived. Whereas high-speed cornering has been a problem, the W15's low-speed performance has been emphasized as a strength, and boosting performance in faster bends would enhance the package. There are positives, Hamilton said in Jeddah. The car is good in low speed, we have to add a lot of load in the high speed. I think if we were able to do that, then I think it puts us in the fight, but we've got some work to do. There are always solutions being worked on in the team's factory, and the first step will be taken this weekend in Melbourne when the team returns to the track. As Andrew Shovlin claims, the team is planning experiments for the Australian Grand Prix weekend to address difficulties with the W15. So, we can expect to see the first minor upgrades hit the W15 this weekend. There's definitely data that we're picking through from Jeddah, Shovlin said. We're also looking at data from the Bahrain race, Bahrain test, and we will come up with a plan for how we approach free practice in Melbourne. But it's not just based on what we did in Jeddah. There's a lot of work going on within aerodynamics department, vehicle dynamics department. We're trying to design some experiments there that will hopefully give us a direction that's good for performance. Shovlin confirmed that the squad is focusing on high-speed corner performance in preparation for Australia. He thinks that the vulnerability that proved costly in Bahrain was caused by a combination of reasons. It's a few things, he said. One of them was the balance wasn't great. So those very fast corners, the walls aren't particularly far away. So the ones where the driver wants a lot of confidence, and quite often we were snapping to oversteer if they really leant on the tyres. And you can easily imagine how unsettling that is for the drivers. Now, that was a factor in qualifying and the race. In qualifying, we were also suffering a bit with the bouncing. That was less of a problem in the race. There's more fuel on the car. You're going a bit slower, and that seemed to calm down and wasn't such an issue. And then the big one is we don't really have enough grip there. So that's one of the things that we are working hard on this week, because Melbourne has similar nature of corners. So we're doing a lot of work to try and understand why did we not seem to have the grip of some of our close competitors. Shovlin notes that Lewis Hamilton and George Russell employed distinct setup approaches throughout the Jeddah weekend. Some of that was they'd complained about bouncing, he explained. So we were looking at ways of trying to improve that. You can play with ride heights, you can play with stiffness, and that all seems effective. And also they were just trying to tune the balance through the speed range. So what's the car like in the low speed? What's it like in the high speed? Although the cars later converged, Shovlin says that useful lessons were learned. When you change things, you can see the differences. So one car making changes, you can see how it performs run to run. We can also look at the global performance of the two cars, but fundamentally the limitations that we had in qualifying and the race, they were broadly the same for both. So it's telling you, it's not a small difference, it's not a tiny bit of camber or a spring or bar here and there. It's something more fundamental that we need to dig into and understand. Do you think they have been able to understand these problems over the last week and a half? And could they start the Australian Grand Prix further up on the grid? And maybe, just maybe, challenge for a podium spot this weekend? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below.